Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over a decade and had seen contestants experience every emotion imaginable. He had seen joy, excitement, frustration, and disappointment, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened on a Thursday afternoon in April 2025. A contestant was about to break down in the middle of a round so completely that she would walk off the stage in tears, unable to continue. Steve Harvey would stop the entire production, clear the stage, and spend the next hour with a grieving woman who had been trying to hold herself together for the sake of her family. What happened next would remind everyone watching that some pain runs too deep to hide, that healing cannot be rushed, and that sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is simply stop and acknowledge someone's suffering. Before we get into this powerful story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss these moments that remind us that being human means sometimes we need to pause, to feel, and to heal before we can move forward. The Chen family stood on the Family Feud stage ready to compete. There was Lisa Chen, 42, along with her sister Amy, her brother David, her elderly mother Margaret, and her teenage daughter Sophie. They had traveled from Portland, Oregon to Los Angeles for the taping. They were dressed nicely, smiling for the cameras, appearing excited to play. But anyone who looked closely at Lisa's eyes would have seen something beneath the smile, a heaviness, a sadness that no amount of game show energy could completely hide. The game started normally. Steve went through his usual introductions, asking each family member about themselves. When he got to Lisa, she smiled and said she was a high school English teacher. Steve asked about her family, and Lisa gestured to her daughter, Sophie, age 16. Steve, always observant, noticed that Lisa's introduction seemed incomplete. There was a pause, a hesitation, as if she wanted to say more but could not. But Steve moved on, not wanting to push. The game began with the usual energy and excitement. There were 3 questions into the round when it happened. Steve read the question from his card. The question was simple, meant to be light and relatable. Name something a husband does that makes his wife smile. It was the kind of question Family Feud asked all the time. The kind of question designed to get sweet, funny answers about bringing flowers or doing dishes or telling jokes. But for Lisa Chen, standing at the podium, that question hit like a physical blow. Her face crumbled. Her hands started shaking. And before anyone could react, she turned away from the podium and walked off the stage, her body racked with sobs. Lisa Chen had met her husband Daniel in college at the University of Oregon. They were both studying education, both planning to become teachers. Daniel wanted to teach history and coach basketball. Lisa wanted to teach English and run the school newspaper. They met in a shared education theory class and bonded over their idealism about making a difference in young people's lives. They fell in love over late-night study sessions and debates about the best teaching methods. They married right after graduation and moved to Portland together. They both got teaching jobs at the same high school, which felt like fate. Daniel coached the boys' basketball team. Lisa taught sophomore English and advised the school paper. They were that couple everyone loved, the young teachers who were passionate about their work and clearly devoted to each other. They bought a small house in a neighborhood full of families. They talked about having children and building a life together. When Sophie was born 3 years into their marriage, Daniel cried with joy. He was an amazing father from day one. He would wake up for midnight feedings even though he had early morning basketball practice. He would read to Sophie every night, doing different voices for all the characters. He attended every parent event at her school. He coached her soccer team on weekends. He was patient and loving and present. Everyone who knew Daniel said he was born to be a father. Lisa and Daniel had one of those marriages that made other couples envious. They still held hands after 15 years together. They still went on date nights. They still laughed at each other's jokes. They supported each other's careers and parenting decisions. They were partners in the truest sense. When other couples complained about their spouses, Lisa would feel grateful that she had found someone who truly understood her and loved her completely. Daniel had a habit that Lisa loved. Every morning before leaving for work, he would leave a note for Lisa somewhere in the house, sometimes on the bathroom mirror, sometimes tucked in her lunch bag, sometimes on the coffee maker. The notes were simple. Love you, have a great day. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for being an amazing mom and wife. These small notes were Daniel's way of making sure Lisa knew she was loved and appreciated every single day. On a Tuesday morning in October 2024, Daniel left a note on the coffee maker as usual. Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you forever. He kissed Lisa goodbye, hugged Sophie, and headed to school for an early morning basketball practice. Lisa found the note while making her coffee and smiled, as she did every morning. She tucked it in her purse to save with all the others. She had kept every single note Daniel had ever written her, storing them in a decorative box in their bedroom closet. That afternoon, Lisa was in the middle of teaching when the principal came to her classroom door. The look on his face told Lisa something was terribly wrong. The principal took her into the hallway and told her there had been an accident. Daniel had been driving home after school when another driver ran a red light and hit his car on the driver's side. Daniel had been rushed to the hospital. Lisa needed to come immediately. Lisa raced to the hospital with her sister Amy, who had been called to pick up Sophie from school. Lisa kept telling herself Daniel would be okay. He was strong and healthy. He would have injuries, but he would recover. But when she arrived at the hospital, the doctor's face told her everything before any words were spoken. Daniel had sustained severe head trauma. They had done everything they could. Daniel Chen was gone. Lisa's husband, Sophie's father, the love of her life, was dead at age 42. The next weeks passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, insurance paperwork, and well-meaning visitors bringing casseroles Lisa could not eat. Sophie withdrew into herself, barely speaking, spending hours in her room. Lisa's mother, Margaret, moved in temporarily to help. Amy and David came over daily, trying to provide support while dealing with their own grief over losing their brother-in-law who they had loved like a brother. The house felt empty despite being full of people. Lisa returned to work after 3 weeks because she did not know what else to do. Staying home meant being surrounded by memories of Daniel. The empty chair at the dinner table. The side of the bed that was no longer warm. The notes she kept finding tucked in unexpected places, written weeks or months before his death. Lisa would find a note in a coat pocket or between the pages of a book, and it would break her all over again. Sophie struggled terribly with her father's death. She had been a bright, cheerful student before the accident. Afterward, her grades dropped. She quit the soccer team her father had coached. She stopped seeing friends. She would cry in the middle of dinner or wake up screaming from nightmares. Lisa tried to get Sophie into grief counseling, but Sophie refused to talk about her feelings. The school counselor said it was normal for teenagers to struggle with processing loss, that it would take time. The Family Feud opportunity came about 5 months after Daniel's death. Amy had applied for the show months earlier before the accident, thinking it would be a fun family experience. When they were selected to compete, Amy almost declined, thinking it was too soon. But Lisa's mother, Margaret, insisted they should go. Daniel would want us to do this, Margaret said. He would want us to try to have moments of joy even while we're grieving. We can't stop living because he's gone. Lisa was reluctant, but eventually agreed. She thought maybe it would be good for Sophie to see her mother doing something normal, something fun. She thought maybe forcing herself to smile and laugh for a few hours would help her practice feeling okay again. She told herself she could handle it. She told herself it was just a game show, just a few hours, and then they could go back to their quiet grieving. She convinced herself she was ready. She was wrong. When Steve read the question about things a husband does that make his wife smile, Lisa's entire body tensed. The question was innocent. The question was meant to be sweet and lighthearted. But for Lisa, the question was a knife straight to her heart, because her husband had done a million things that made her smile. He had left her notes every morning. He had made her coffee just the way she liked it. He had kissed her forehead when he thought she was sleeping. He had danced with her in the kitchen while dinner cooked. He had told terrible jokes just to see her laugh, but her husband was gone. Her husband would never again do anything to make her smile. Her husband was buried in Rose City Cemetery under a headstone that Lisa visited every Sunday. And standing on this game show stage, being asked to think about all the things her husband did that made her smile, Lisa could not hold it together anymore. The grief she had been carrying for 5 months, the grief she had been trying to manage and contain and function through, came crashing down on her all at once. Lisa tried to answer. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, to get through this moment, but no words came out. Instead, a sob escaped. Then another, her vision blurred with tears. She could hear the audience's confused silence. She could see Steve's concerned face. She could feel her family's alarm, but she could not stop crying. She could not catch her breath. She could not stand at this podium and pretend to be okay when she was so very far from okay. Lisa turned away from the podium and walked off the stage. She did not know where she was going. She just knew she needed to get away from the lights and the cameras and the question that had shattered her carefully maintained composure. She made it to the edge of the stage before her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, her hands covering her face, crying so hard her whole body shook. Production assistants rushed toward her. Her sister Amy jumped off the family platform and ran to Lisa's side. Steve Harvey stood at the podium, his card still in his hand, completely stunned. The audience sat in shocked silence. This was not a dramatic exit for effect. This was not someone upset about losing a game. This was real, profound grief breaking through the surface. Steve made an immediate decision. "Stop the cameras," he said to the production crew. "Everyone clear the stage except family. Get this woman some privacy." The crew immediately complied, shutting down cameras and clearing all non-essential personnel. Steve walked over to where Lisa sat on the floor, her sister holding her while she cried. Sophie had also left the family platform and was kneeling next to her mother, tears streaming down her own face. Margaret stood nearby, her hand over her mouth, her own eyes wet with tears. David stood awkwardly, wanting to help but not knowing how. Steve crouched down next to the group, his usual showman energy completely gone, replaced by genuine concern and compassion. "Ma'am," Steve said gently, "I don't know what's happening, but I can see you're in real pain. We don't need to play this game. Take your time. Breathe." Lisa looked up at Steve, mascara running down her face, unable to speak through her sobs. Amy spoke for her sister. "Her husband died 5 months ago, car accident. The question about husbands, it just hit her hard. We shouldn't have come. It's too soon. I'm so sorry." Amy was crying now too. Steve's expression shifted from concern to deep sadness. He sat down on the floor next to Lisa, not caring about his expensive suit or the cameras or the schedule. "Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry. No one should have to go through that kind of loss." He looked at the production team. "Get some water and some tissues and give us some time." He turned back to Lisa. "You don't have to talk, you don't have to do anything, just breathe. I'm right here with you." Lisa tried to compose herself, but the tears would not stop. "I'm sorry," she managed to say between sobs. "I thought I could do this. I thought I was okay. But that question, thinking about all the things Daniel did, that made me smile. I just couldn't. He's gone and I miss him so much and I don't know how to keep going without him." She dissolved into tears again. Sophie wrapped her arms around her mother. "Mom, it's okay. We can leave. We don't have to be here." Steve shook his head. "Nobody's leaving until she's ready. There's no rush. This show can wait. Your grief can't." He looked at Lisa with such kindness that it made her cry harder. "I lost my father when I was young. I know what it's like to feel like the world should stop because your world has stopped. And I know what it's like when the world keeps going and expects you to keep going with it. So right now we're stopping. We're sitting here with you, and you can feel whatever you need to feel." They sat there on the stage floor for nearly 20 minutes. Steve did not try to rush Lisa or make her feel bad about stopping the show. He just sat with her, occasionally patting her hand, letting her cry. Amy held her sister. Sophie stayed close to her mother. Margaret and David stood nearby, grateful that someone was showing their family such kindness. Slowly, gradually, Lisa's sobs subsided. She accepted water and tissues from a production assistant. She wiped her face and took shaky breaths. "I'm embarrassed," Lisa finally said. "I just broke down on television in front of hundreds of people." Steve shook his head firmly. "Don't be embarrassed. Grief is not something to be ashamed of. Love is not something to be ashamed of. You loved your husband deeply and you're grieving him deeply. That's beautiful, even though it's painful. Anyone watching this who has a heart will understand." He helped Lisa to her feet. "Let's go somewhere more comfortable and talk for a few minutes. Just you, me, and your family." Steve led the Chen family to a private room backstage. He had chairs brought in and asked production to give them complete privacy. Once everyone was seated, Steve looked at Lisa. "Tell me about your husband. What was his name?" Lisa's voice was still shaky, but she managed to speak. Daniel Chen. He was a high school history teacher and basketball coach. He was the kindest man I ever knew. He made me laugh every day. He was an amazing father to Sophie. He was my best friend." Steve listened as Lisa talked about Daniel. She told him about the notes Daniel left every morning, about his terrible jokes, about how he coached Sophie's soccer team and attended every school event, about how he danced with Lisa in the kitchen and brought her coffee in bed on weekends. As Lisa talked, her tears slowed. Talking about Daniel hurt, but it also felt good to speak his name out loud, to share memories of him, to have someone really listen. Steve turned to Sophie. "And you lost your dad. That's one of the hardest things anyone can go through, especially at your age." Sophie nodded, unable to speak. Steve continued gently. "I want you to know something. Your dad's love for you didn't die when he died. That love is still with you. It's in every lesson he taught you, every memory you have, every value you hold because of him. He's still your dad. Death doesn't change that." Sophie started crying again, but she nodded. Steve looked at the whole family. "Here's what I know about grief. It doesn't follow a timeline. People will tell you it gets easier, and eventually it does, but not in a straight line. There will be good days and terrible days. There will be moments when you forget he's gone, and then moments when the loss hits you all over again like it just happened. That question I asked out there, that was one of those moments. And Lisa, you did nothing wrong by breaking down. You're 5 months into learning to live without the person you loved most. Give yourself grace." He continued, his voice gentle but firm. "I also know that you're trying to be strong for your daughter. And Sophie, you're trying to be strong for your mom. But you both need to know that it's okay to not be strong. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have days when you can't function. You don't have to pretend to be okay. Grief is love with nowhere to go. The depth of your grief shows the depth of your love. Honor that. Don't hide it." Amy spoke up. We've been trying to support them, but I don't think we've been doing enough. We didn't know it was this hard. Lisa has been so good at putting on a brave face. Steve nodded. That's common. The grieving person often tries to protect everyone else from their pain, but Lisa can't heal if she's spending all her energy pretending she's okay. And Sophie can't heal if she thinks she needs to be strong for her mom. You all need to be honest about how much you're hurting. Steve made a decision. I'm going to give you some resources, phone numbers for grief counselors who specialize in sudden loss. Information about support groups for widows and for teenagers who have lost parents. You need professional help working through this, not just family support. There's no shame in that. This is too big to carry alone. He pulled out his phone and started making notes of organizations and contacts to share with the family. Lisa looked at Steve with gratitude. Thank you for being so kind. You didn't have to stop everything for us. You could have just moved on with the show. Steve looked at her seriously. Ma'am, I host a game show. I make people laugh for a living, but none of that matters more than treating people with humanity. You were hurting. I wasn't going to make you perform through that pain just to get footage. Some things are more important than television. He stood up. Now we have a decision to make. We can call this done and you can go home with no hard feelings, or if you feel up to it, we can go back out there and play. Not for the cameras or the prize money, but for your family. For the experience of doing something together that's not about grief, but only if you want to. There's no pressure either way. Lisa looked at Sophie, then at her mother and siblings. What do you all want to do? Sophie surprised everyone by speaking. I think we should play. Dad would want us to. He loved game shows. He would have loved being here. Lisa nodded slowly. Okay, let's play, but if I start to lose it again, I'm walking off and that's okay. Steve smiled. That's more than okay. That's perfect. Let's go have some fun in honor of Daniel. They walked back to the stage together. Steve addressed the audience who had been waiting patiently. Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed something important. We witnessed a family dealing with profound loss. Lisa's husband Daniel passed away 5 months ago and a question triggered her grief. We took some time, we talked, and now this family has decided they want to play in Daniel's memory, so let's give them the warmest welcome back. The audience erupted in supportive applause and cheers. Many people were crying. The competing family, who had been standing by quietly, also applauded with obvious compassion. Lisa returned to the podium, her eyes still red but her posture stronger. Steve asked the question again, but this time with gentleness. Lisa, in memory of Daniel, tell us something your husband did that made you smile. Lisa took a breath and answered. He left me notes every morning, every single morning for 15 years. Love notes hidden around the house. Her voice cracked, but she held it together. The board revealed that Leaves' love notes was the number 2 answer with 24 points. The audience cheered. Lisa smiled through her tears. Steve reached over and squeezed her hand. That's beautiful. Daniel sounds like he was a wonderful man. Lisa nodded. He was. He really was. They continued the game, and the Chen family played with energy and joy, laughing and cheering for each other. They ended up winning their round. But the money did not matter. What mattered was that they had done something together as a family, in Daniel's memory, and they had made it through. The Family Feud episode aired 6 weeks after the taping. The producers made a thoughtful decision about how to present Lisa's breakdown. They included it in the episode, but handled it with sensitivity, showing Steve stopping the show and sitting with Lisa on the floor. They included an on-screen message with resources for grief support. The clip of Steve's compassionate response went viral within hours of the episode airing, viewed over 50 million times across social media platforms. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people who had experienced sudden loss reached out to share their own stories. Widows and widowers talked about the moments when grief ambushed them unexpectedly. Parents who had lost children. Children who had lost parents. The comment sections became spaces of shared grief and mutual support. People thanked Steve for showing compassion rather than just moving on with the show. They thanked Lisa for showing that grief does not follow a schedule and that it is acceptable to break down when overwhelmed. Lisa Chen became an unexpected voice for those navigating sudden loss. She started a blog about her grief journey, sharing the honest, messy reality of learning to live without Daniel. She wrote about the notes she still found hidden around the house, about the first holidays without him, about Sophie's struggles and small victories, about the days when getting out of bed felt impossible, about the moments of unexpected joy that came mixed with guilt for feeling anything other than sadness. Her writing was raw and real, and it resonated with thousands of readers. She wrote one post specifically about the Family Feud experience. In it, she explained why she had agreed to do the show so soon after Daniel's death, how she had thought she could handle it, and how that question had broken through her carefully maintained composure. She wrote about sitting on the floor crying while a game show host she had never met showed her more compassion than some people in her own life. She wrote about how Steve's kindness had given her permission to stop pretending she was okay when she was not. The post's most powerful section addressed the moment she decided to continue playing. She wrote that Sophie saying Daniel would have wanted them to play had been a turning point. It was the first time since the accident that Sophie had spoken about what Daniel would have wanted. The first time Sophie had engaged with his memory in a positive way rather than just drowning in loss. In that moment on the Family Feud stage, talking about Daniel's habit of leaving love notes, both Lisa and Sophie had been able to remember him with love rather than just pain. It was a small step in their healing journey, but an important one. Sophie also began healing after the Family Feud experience. She returned to school with slightly more engagement. She joined a grief support group for teenagers who had lost parents. She slowly began talking about her father with her friends and family. She wrote an essay for her English class about her dad's love of basketball and how he had taught her that sports were about teamwork and character, not just winning. The essay won a school award. Sophie dedicated it to her father's memory. Steve Harvey spoke about the experience in multiple interviews. He explained that stopping the show had been an easy decision. Producing television was important, but treating people with dignity and compassion was more important. He talked about his own experiences with loss and how he had learned that grief is not something to rush through or hide from. He encouraged other television hosts and producers to remember that contestants and guests are real people with real lives, not just content for entertainment. The incident sparked conversations in the television industry about how reality shows and game shows handle contestants in crisis. Several shows implemented new protocols for identifying and supporting participants who might be dealing with trauma or grief. Mental health professionals were brought on as consultants to help production teams recognize signs of distress and respond appropriately. The industry began shifting toward recognizing that entertainment should not come at the cost of human dignity. 1 year after Daniel's death, Lisa and Sophie appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show for a follow-up interview. The change in them was evident. They still carried sadness, visible in their eyes, but they also showed strength and healing. Lisa talked about the first year of grief, how it had been the hardest thing she had ever experienced. She talked about the grief counseling that Steve's resources had connected her with, and how therapy had helped both her and Sophie process their loss in healthier ways. Sophie, now 17, spoke about her journey. She explained that she had been angry at first, angry at the driver who caused the accident, angry at the world for taking her father, angry at herself for not appreciating every moment with him when he was alive. Through counseling, she had learned that anger was part of grief, that it was acceptable to feel it, but that she could not let it consume her. She had learned to channel her grief into advocacy, speaking at school assemblies about the importance of safe driving and the lasting impact of traffic accidents on families. Lisa shared something that surprised many viewers. She had taken all of Daniel's notes, every single one she had saved over 15 years, and had them professionally compiled into a book. She added her own reflections on what each note had meant to her and how Daniel's consistent expressions of love had sustained her through their marriage and now through her grief. She published the book privately, just a few copies for family and close friends. But word spread, and she was approached by a publisher who wanted to release it more widely. The book, titled Morning Notes, 15 Years of Love Letters, became a bestseller. It resonated with couples who wanted to appreciate their partners more, with people who had lost spouses and found comfort in Lisa's honest portrayal of grief, and with anyone who had ever loved deeply. The book's proceeds went to a foundation Lisa had started in Daniel's name, providing financial support to families dealing with sudden loss. The foundation helped with funeral costs, counseling fees, and daily expenses during the immediate aftermath of losing a loved one. Lisa returned to teaching, but also began speaking at conferences about grief and resilience. She was honest about the fact that healing was not linear, that there were still hard days, that she still cried when she found one of Daniel's old notes or smelled his cologne on a jacket she had not given away yet. But she also talked about finding moments of joy again, about learning to carry her grief while also moving forward, about honoring Daniel by living fully rather than merely existing. Sophie decided to study psychology in college, specifically wanting to work with teenagers dealing with trauma and loss. She credited her own grief journey and the support she had received with inspiring this career path. She wanted to help other young people navigate the kind of pain she had experienced. She started a blog for teenagers who had lost parents, creating a space where they could share their experiences and support each other. The blog developed a following of thousands of teenagers and young adults dealing with grief. The Chen family established an annual tradition on the anniversary of Daniel's death. Instead of spending the day in sadness, they spent it doing things Daniel had loved. They played basketball in his honor. They watched his favorite movies. They cooked his favorite meal. They shared stories about him, laughing at memories of his terrible jokes and his competitive spirit during family game nights. They made the day about celebrating his life rather than mourning his death. It did not erase the pain, but it helped them remember Daniel with love and gratitude. 3 years after that day on the Family Feud stage, Lisa wrote a reflection about how her breakdown had become a turning point in her healing journey. She wrote about how she had been trying so hard to be strong, to function normally, to protect everyone from her pain. The moment when she could no longer hold it together, when she walked off that stage crying, had been the moment she finally gave herself permission to fall apart. And falling apart had been necessary before she could begin putting herself back together. She wrote about Steve Harvey's compassion, how his decision to stop everything and sit with her on the floor had shown her that her grief mattered more than any television schedule. His willingness to acknowledge her pain rather than rushing past, it had given her permission to acknowledge it herself. His reminder that grief is love with nowhere to go had helped her understand that her overwhelming sadness was not weakness, but rather evidence of how deeply she had loved Daniel. The story of Lisa Chen walking off the Family Feud stage became more than just a viral moment. It became a cultural touchpoint for conversations about grief, about compassion, about how we treat people who are suffering. It reminded viewers that everyone they encounter might be carrying invisible burdens. It demonstrated that sometimes the kindest thing we can do is simply stop, acknowledge someone's pain, and sit with them in it rather than rushing them through it or past it. Steve Harvey often referenced the experience when discussing what it meant to be a good host. He explained that his job was not just to entertain, but to honor the humanity of every person on his stage. He talked about how that 20 minutes sitting on the floor with Lisa had been more important than any punchline he had ever delivered. He encouraged other entertainers to remember that behind every contestant, every guest, every audience member was a complete human being with a full life, some of it joyful and some of it heartbreaking. 5 years after Daniel's death, Lisa started dating again. It felt strange and guilty at first, but her therapist and her family encouraged her. Daniel would have wanted her to find happiness again, they reminded her. The first man she dated seriously was also a widower who understood grief in ways that others could not. Their relationship was built on shared understanding of loss and appreciation for second chances at love. Lisa never stopped loving Daniel, never stopped keeping his notes, never stopped honoring his memory. But she learned that her heart was big enough to hold grief and new love simultaneously. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We share these powerful real-life moments because they teach us essential lessons about being human. Lisa Chen's breakdown on the Family Feud stage was not a moment of weakness. It was a moment of truth. It was a woman finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her grief rather than pretending to be okay. It was a reminder that healing cannot be rushed, that grief does not follow schedules, and that sometimes we need permission to fall apart before we can heal. Whether you are grieving a loss, supporting someone who is grieving, or simply trying to navigate the hard moments of life, know that it is acceptable to not be okay. It is acceptable to cry. It is acceptable to need time and space and support. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching, and remember that compassion costs nothing, but means everything to someone who is suffering.